Hello, guys. I'm Carrie from Carrie Tries It. And in this video, I'm gonna watch demonstration of American dialects, accents, 1958. Very interesting for me, and I hope you will enjoy this video. So let's start. Dialects, correct me.
Here are three different words.
Mary.
Each one spelled
Mary.
differently. But are they pronounced
Mary.
differently? And are they pronounced with the same differences everywhere?
Mary.
Well, listen.
Mary, Mary, Mary.
What?
Mary, Mary, Mary.
Mary, Mary, Mary.
What is the same?
Mary, Mary. Mary, Mary, Mary.
And I would say
Mary,
Mary.
Mary.
6 people, and none of us says these 3 words in exactly the same way. In just a moment, we're going to answer the question, who's right and who's wrong?
Mary, Mary, and
Here
Mary.
is Miss Gwaltney. Now,
That's
Miss
how I
Gwaltney comes
understand.
from Smithfield, Virginia. And next to her is Miss Windness. Miss Windness comes from Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That's right.
Next to her, Mr. John Kepke from that wonderful city, Brooklyn, New York. Next to him, Miss Buchan from North Andover, Massachusetts. And next to her, Miss Blair from Dallas, Texas. Take a look now at those first 3 words that they said for us. I'm going to ask them each one now to say them again. Starting with Miss Gwaltney. Will you say these 3 words again, please?
Mary, Mary, Mary.
Now notice Miss
Mary,
Gwaltney pronouncing
Mary,
those 3 words differently.
Mary.
They are not all the same. Again, please.
Mary, Mary, Mary.
Mary, Mary, Mary. Now, Miss Windness,
Mary, Mary,
Mary,
Mary.
Mary.
Mary, Mary, Mary. All 3 the same. Mr. Kepke.
Mary, Mary, Mary.
Mary,
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 Mary, Mary.
All 3 different. Miss Bouquet?
Mary, Mary, Mary.
Mary,
Mary.
Mary, Mary. All 3 different again. Miss Blair, please.
Mary, Mary, Mary.
Mary, Mary, Mary. All the same again. And again, I say Mary, Mary, Mary. All 3 differently.
Mary,
Now, what does this mean? Here's what it
Mary.
means. We have learned to spell these 3 words in regular ways. And if we don't spell our language correctly, we are called illiterate. In other words, the written language has become very uniform in terms of what we call spelling. But people who talk are not uniform in the same way. Now, because we've all learned to pronounce these words in various ways, no, let's put it around the other way. Because we've all learned to spell these words the same way, we get the idea we ought to pronounce them the same way, one right way. This is just not true. We are going to pronounce them differently, but we must learn to spell them the same way. Please remember, letters do not have sounds. We do not pronounce letters. These are simply symbolic representations for what we say in the language. And how our differences pattern is what we're going to show you on this program. Now, how can we tie up these differences, which we've already noticed, with what we call dialect areas? Well, I'm going to show you. The first thing I'm going to do, again, is to start with Miss Gwaltney. And I'm going to ask her if she will... No, I don't think I'll do it that way. The first thing I'm going to do is to tell you this. I'm going to tell you this. If you pronounce these 3 words, Mary, 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 differently,
Mary, Mary,
you
Mary.
will have learned your English east of the Allegheny Mountains. Those who pronounce those words differently learned their English east of the Allegheny Mountains. If you pronounce those words the same, you learned your English west of the Allegheny Mountains. Just remember that. Now, when you
Wow.
come back, yeah?
So west,
And I'm
if it's
going
your
to
accent
talk
of
about
west,
this word.
it's okay to say
spelled Greasy.
the same.
Now, I am going to make 2 predictions. I am going to predict what Miss Gwaltney is going to say here and what Miss Windness is
It's
going to
cool.
say. Because we know where they're from. Remember, Miss Gwaltney comes from Smithfield, Virginia. Miss Windness from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now, our problem is this. And Miss Windness, and neither Miss Windness nor Miss Gwaltney can see this card that I have here. What I'm going to do is this. I am going to predict that Miss Gwaltney is going to pronounce, that is going to say a
She-
sound that is represented there by that letter.
Crazy?
This is what she is going to say. She is going to pronounce
Z.
that sound
Crazy.
in that word. Miss Gwaltney, will you say this for me?
It's greasy.
It's greasy. It's
Greasy.
with
Greasy.
that particular sound.
I thought
Now,
the same.
Miss Witness, will you pronounce it for me? Miss Witness now is going to say the other one. She is going to say this. Miss Witness?
It's greasy.
It's greasy.
Greasy.
With this sound. All right. In other words, we have established something here by saying, in effect, if you learned your English north of a certain line, you are going to say greasy for this word. If south of a certain line, greasy.
Oh,
Let's see how that line
man.
runs.
Where's
Actually,
the right
the line
for
runs
whole
right
United
along
States?
here.
General American language,
parallel 40
pronunciation,
degree.
English.
Right across here. And this particular parallel 40, right over here, runs right along with the Lincoln Highway, which is Route 30, I believe, dividing this part of the country into two neat halves. In other words, we have now a dividing line down the Allegheny Mountains for east and west, and another for north and south. In other words, we begin to get a pattern which emerges in terms of our areas. Here is the first large quarter of the country up here, east of the mountains and and north of this line. Here is number 2, south of it, number 3, and number 4. We've divided the country now then into 4 great areas. Although it might look unbalanced geographically in terms of population, it's a pretty good division. Now let's see if this particular greasy line does work as we
Greasy,
predict.
greasy.
I'm now going to come back to Mr. Kepke. I'm going to skip him and go to Miss Buchanan and ask her what she says for this. And you'll see why I'm skipping Mr. Kepke in just a minute. Miss
Greasy.
Buchanan? Greasy. North again. Miss Blair?
Greasy.
Greasy. Another, again, from Dallas, Texas, Miss Blair gives us a Z sound. So far, everything is fine. Now I'm going to come back to Mr. Kepke. Remember, Mr. Kepke's from Brooklyn, and ask him what he says.
I say greasy.
Now, Mr. Kepke says greasy. Now, is our prediction wrong? Are our observations wrong? No. Because in the area around Manhattan, people past a certain age, what I mean by this is people in a certain generation, are going to say greasy and not greasy. Mr. Kepke happens to be in that particular generation bracket that says greasy rather than greasy. The school kids at the present time will say very definitely greasy now, but in his generation it was greasy. These kinds of, if you will, observations of correlation we can make, and we find we can get so we can predict pretty well what kinds of things we can expect in terms of what parts of the country. Now let me go on for just a second. Let me do it this way. I want to tell you that there's another way of doing dialects than just by vowels, which is what we were working on, except for this one consonant. But most of the things we're going to be doing here is by
I'm so
is by
interested in
vowels.
put it
But
on.
there is another way. That
How
we
they
talk
can
about
say in
dialects, and
different
that is
ways.
what vocabulary items are used. Now, as a matter of fact, most of the dialect work that has been done to date has been done on vocabulary, on words. You know, you've all had the experience of hearing something that's very familiar to you called something quite different in another part of the country. I remember that when I first went to Boston, I was very surprised to hear what I call soda pop. I wonder if Miss Buchanan has a different kind of way of calling soda pop than I had, and if it's the one that I remembered. Miss Buchanan, what do you call it?
We call it tonic.
They call it tonic. Now, that was something that my mother used to give me in the springtime. But you see, tonic is a perfectly ordinary word for soda pop in the area around Boston. Therefore, we don't get too surprised about this kind of thing. That is, that different words are going to be used. In fact, I'm going to ask the panel now for a few other ones. I'm going to start now with Miss Gwaltney and ask her. 1 minute, just a second. You know what I'm going to ask you yet, not soda pop. I want you all to know that I have not talked to these good people before the program, so I'm going to be maybe as surprised at some of the things that come out as you will. Miss Gwaltney, when you're referring to more than one person in a group, how do you refer to?
Y'all.
Yeah, y'all.
Y'all.
Yeah, not y'all, like that. Miss Witness, would you use that particular way of referring to people?
No.
What do you say?
No.
You.
You, just like that.
You.
Mr. Kepke?
You.
You. Miss Buchanan?
You.
You. Miss Blair?
Y'all.
Y'all.
Yo.
In other words, there seems to be, obviously, which I think doesn't surprise anybody, a northern and southern division here in terms of whether you use y'all or not. I'm also a y'all speaker. I'm also a greasy speaker. You see, so again, these particular kinds of things are patterning out. Now, I'm going to ask some other questions. Again, I want to start with Miss Gwaltney and ask her whether she has, what do you call the little animal that's out in the woods that's black and has a white stripe down its back and a sort of bushy tail and at times emits a very unpleasant
What
odor?
is that?
Skunk.
You say skunk.
Skunk.
Now, may I go to Miss Blair and ask her what she says for that?
I say skunk.
You say skunk, too. And how about the rest of our panel, starting with Miss Witness?
Skunk.
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 Do any of the panel say polecat? I see heads shaking. Nobody says polecat? That's very interesting because I'm a polecat speaker myself, though of course I've heard people say skunk. Well, let's ask a few more. How about Miss Gwaltney again? Miss Gwaltney again from Smithfield, Virginia. You have eaten cornbread all your life, haven't you?
No, not really.
You've heard the term.
Oh, yes.
Do you make a distinction between cornbread and ordinary kind of bread?
Rolls and...
No, not rolls, just plain ordinary bread. What do you call ordinary bread? Just plain bread?
Just bread.
Just bread. So do
Just
I.
bread.
Have you ever heard people that say light bread?
I might have heard it, but...
I might have too, but I don't use it very much either.
No.
Now, Miss Blair, may I ask you, what do you say for that? Miss Blair from Dallas.
Well, I would say cornbread. I'd make the distinction.
Cornbread and what other kind of bread?
Just bread.
Just plain bread, all right? Now, I'm going to go back to Miss Gwaltney again and ask her, have you ever heard, what do you say corn shucks or corn husks?
Corn husk.
You say corn husks and not corn shucks. Miss Blair?
Corn husk.
All right, rest of the panel. What do you say? Starting with Witness. What do you say?
Corn husk.
You just say husks. All right, now I'm going to show you a map which has been made up in terms of certain observations in regard to vocabulary. Here is the you-all line right here. That's the you-all line. In other words, south of this you have you-all speakers, and north of this line, and you see where this is going, very close to the Mason-Dixon line, you have you speakers. Now these other lines here are for this one, the dotted line here, is for corn shucks, which I have said all my life, but I have not made the light bread distinction, which goes very close, as you can see, to the you-all line. And the polecat one and the skunk one is not on here, incidentally, but it's right about here. And I've been a polecat speaker all my life. Now, one of the reasons, actually, why I personally feel that vocabulary items are not as accurate in terms of getting dialect boundaries is just the kind of thing that we've heard here this afternoon. That is that standard speakers of English are generally more inclined to use words that are uniform. In other words, polecat speakers have, so to speak, become skunk speakers. In other words, I would never write polecat. I would always write skunk if I were writing even a letter.
I don't understand what he's
Polecat is
talking
the
about,
word
but
that
it's
I
okay.
heard.
It's
So you
funny,
see, in
it's
the case
interesting.
of my own particular usage, some of this business agrees, but some doesn't. But now again, what we've been interested in, and what we are interested in this business of the vowels.
Put it on!
Which I think is a better indication of dialect differentiation than the words. So let's return now to our vowels and see if we can have a few more here. Let me ask, starting again with Miss Gwaltney, please. What do you say for this one, number 3?
Put it on.
Put it on. Put it on. Miss Witness?
Put it on.
Put it on.
Oh, I see.
Put it on.
Put it on. Miss Buchanan?
Put it on.
Put it on.
Put it
Miss
on.
Blair?
I learned put it on.
Put it on.
I say put it
All right, now, I
on,
say
but
put it
I
on.
learned put it on.
Just like that. Put it on. Mr. Kepke again, please.
Put it on.
Miss Witness again, please.
Put it on.
Put it on. Miss Witness's on and my on are pretty good examples of the northern and southern contrast. Remember, I come from Baltimore. I'm a greasy speaker and an on speaker and a Mary, Mary, Mary speaker. Again, patterning is beginning to emerge. Now what I'd like to do is to go right away to Mr. Kepke and ask him if he will read me these lines here in number 4.
Off, dog, often.
Of,
Lot,
dog,
sorry.
Please notice. that what
often,
Mr. Kepke did
lot,
was to say off,
sorry.
often with aw vowels and lot, log, sorry with ah vowels. This is typical of the Central Atlantic seaboard. I'd say the same thing. Listen to me. Off, dog, often, lot, log, sorry. Now, just so far.
I
we've
heard
begun to see
sometimes
the
sorry,
pattern
and I'm
begin
like,
to emerge.
sorry, it's correct.
One thing that people always ask, why should we have these dialect differences?
Yeah, it's so
Well, the best thing
interesting.
that I can say is that we have dialect differences because of two major reasons.
Because?
They're correlated. That's generally cause and effect so much as there's correlation. One with the settlement history of an area, and the other in terms of geographical boundaries. Now, for instance, here in the United States, this is a map now of the United States divided into 8 major dialect areas. I could have divided into 88 or 108 for that matter, but I've selected 8. Now, the areas that we have here, coastal New England, already represented by the Massachusetts speaker, Miss Buchan. We have Mr. Kepke, a northern Central Atlantic Seaboard speaker, and I am a southern Central Atlantic Seaboard speaker. We have a coastal New England speaker, area number 4, Miss Gwaltney from Smithfield, Virginia. And as we are going to see, we have, in the case of Miss Blair from Dallas, a speaker right on the line here that shows between 4 and 6. So, to go again, we have coastal New England, western New England number 2, Central Atlantic Seaboard 3, 4 here, coastal, southern, 5 the upland area, 6 southern Middle West, 7 northern Middle West, where Miss Witness comes from Green Bay, and 8 the far west. Now, as you can see, and it's very simple really to see, there is a correlation in terms of the settlement of the country and the geographical areas. When the first settlers came, they stopped pretty well at the mountains. It wasn't until about 1785, after the Revolution really, that people began going into this area. And this area, of course, is the most recently settled and has the fewest number of people, so obviously we wouldn't expect to get so many dialect areas there as we do here. Now, in terms then of these areas, let's see if we can come back now and get the kinds of patternings that will be typical of these particular dialect areas. And in this case, I would like to start with Miss Buchan. Miss Buchan, you've already read me here, these 3, will you read them rapidly for me again?
Mary, Mary, Mary.
All right, Mary, Mary, Mary places her again east of the Alleghenies.
It's greasy.
Puts her north?
On.
On. Now, her on is the kind I would expect north of Boston. On would be the most usual Boston pronunciation, but north of Boston, where I believe North Andover is, we get on perfectly expected. Now, will you read these?
Off, dog, often. Lot, log, sorry.
Please notice, Miss Buchan says lot, not lot, as Mr. Kepke and I did, for instance. Hear that? Lot. That's our 9th
I would
vowel
say
in that chart,
lot.
the one that's down in the back, the low back rounded vowel. Typical
It's
of New England.
general
Now,
American
will you
accent,
give me number
no?
6, please, Miss Buchan?
Father, pack, pat.
Father, pack, pack. In other
Father,
words, a typical,
Park,
what people call generally,
part.
frappe. What this is the digraph
Father,
of the H in terms
father,
of our chart that we have on the
father.
board first. Now, I want to move immediately now to Mr. Kepke and ask him what he would do with number 7 and 8.
yes, I can.
Yes, I can. I want it in a can.
Please notice that Mr. Kepke makes a distinction.
I want it
Yes,
in
I
a can.
I want it in a can between 7 and 8. Miss Buchan, return to you. What do you do for these?
Yes, I can. I want it in a can.
Yes, I can. I want it in a
Can,
can. No
can.
difference. Now, the difference between the can and can.
Yes, I
distinction.
can. I want
Miss
it in a
Witness,
can.
Can you hear this one? Huh?
I hear it, but I don't say it.
I don't say it. Because after all, you coming from Green Bay couldn't. But I'm just wondering if you heard it. Because quite frequently, people from northern Middle West can't even hear this distinction. I'll say it again. I can. I want it in a can. This particular change is, this particular distinction is the one that is shown right here that circles the area known as the Central Atlantic Seaboard. All Central Atlantic Seaboard speakers will make that distinction. It goes down quite far into the south, too. I'm now going to ask Miss Gwaltney if she makes the distinction between can and can.
Yes, I can. Put it in a can.
Again, please.
Put it in a
Yes, I
can.
can. Put it in a can.
Yes, I can put it in a can. No, I don't hear a distinction there. In other words, you are outside of this particular influence. In other words, we can draw a pretty firm line just on these 2 alone. And again, draw the difference between Brooklyn and New England again, very strongly in terms of this. Now, I'd like to go to Miss Blair, if I might. Miss Blair, you pronounced these all the same, didn't you?
Yes.
Say it
Mary,
again.
Mary, Mary.
All right. And this one was greasy.
That's right.
And this one was?
On.
All right. Now, will you give me, please, number 12?
Any, many, penny.
Now, any, many, penny.
Any,
This pronunciation
many,
instead of any, many,
penny.
penny. School teachers in the South have been trying to get out of the speech of Southern speakers, standard Southern speakers, for a great many years, and I hope they never do. This is a very ancient and honorable pronunciation of these kinds of words and will, I hope, continue. No matter what the school teachers do, standard speakers are still going to say any, many, penny because it's part
Henny,
of the
many,
pattern
penny.
for that area. Now, this is then very typical of the
Annie,
southern Middle West.
Manny,
And again, I want
penny.
to ask Miss
Annie,
Blair if
Manny,
she'll pronounce this word
penny.
for me.
Ash,
Ash. And this one?
ash,
Ash. Ash is diphthongal. Ash. Not ash.
Wash,
Mr. Kepke, will
water,
you tell me how you
ash,
pronounce that?
ask.
Mr. Kepke says ash.
I heard some
Miss
people
Windus,
people
please.
say ask,
Ash.
but
I
it's
say
I thought
ash,
like
but Miss
British.
Blair says
Ask.
ash.
ash. When you hear that particular pronunciation, it is typical of this whole area number 6, this diphthongal pronunciation. In other words,
What if I
Blair
hear
is
a
very
lot of
typical
different
in
dialects and
the
we'll
southern Middle
speak
Western
like
with her
one
inny,
word
penny,
from
and
one
with
dialect,
her
another
ash.
from another
Now,
dialect,
to
so
return again
I'm like
to
mixed.
a typical pronunciation, one that is
Oh my
as
gosh, it's so
unequivocal
hard
as the ash
to speak just
or the
one accent,
and
one
then.
dialect.
Let me go back to Miss Gawaltney. Miss Gawaltney, what will you do for number 10 here?
About
About the house.
Oh, I love it. Say it again, will you?
About the house.
About the house.
about
Please notice, she is not saying
about
"boot
the
the
house.
People say, oh, those people from around Norfolk and so on, they all say a boot the hoose, and so do the Canadians. They all say a boot the hoose. They don't. I'll ask you
Whose?
to say it again. Miss
House,
Gawaltney,
it's
please.
whose?
About the house.
About the house. This
Whose?
is, in terms of the chart
Wow.
word first, an EW, complex nucleus, instead of an A, an AW one. I say about the house now, but I
About
used
the
to say
house.
about the house. But Miss Gawaltney says about the house. This is
About the
very
house.
typical of the tidewater area of the coastal area of Virginia. Now, let me return now, please, to Miss Windus and get the typical kind of pronunciation we hear for northern Middle West. Remember, Miss Windus comes from South Bay, Wisconsin, for number 4.
Off, dog, often, lot, log, sorry.
Will you read me number 5 right away, too?
Wash, water, ash, ask.
This word is
Water,
water. Mr.
Water.
Kepke, what is this word
Water.
in your pronunciation?
Water.
Water. Please notice, the eastern
People
speaker
so
says water,
bored
but the
bored
western
there.
speaker
Why
says
they
water.
came there
water.
if they
Now, Miss Blair, what do
like
you say
40
to
years people on the
this? She says water.
class for
But Miss
first class
Gawaltney, what do
in
you
the
say?
school.
Water.
She says water. In other words,
Water.
our eastern speaker
Give me
and our
water,
southern speaker
please.
right on the
I'm
transition
dying
line
here.
between southern coastal and Dallas both say water. But our northern middle western speaker gives us a good water, and our
Water.
central Atlantic seaboard speaker gives us water. And I say water, exactly. Again, you would expect my pattern to be like central Atlantic seaboard, but it's southern. I say greasy instead of greasy. All right? Miss Windus, again. Will you give me these words?
father, park, part.
Please notice the amount of the R that we hear here. Father, park, part. Say it again, please.
Father, park, part.
Father, park, part.
Father,
A good,
park, part.
stout retraction of the tongue, sort of curled back when you say park and park. Now, may I return now to Miss Buchanan and ask her again to say these words?
Father, park, part.
Father, park, part, where we hear no retraction. Mr. Kepke, please.
Father, and then I have 2 pronunciations for park and part, either that way or park, part.
I like both of them, Mr. Kepke, because
What?
they illustrate what
She
I'm
said
after
it
in this case,
exactly the
namely
same.
Very little, if any, R coloring, you see. In other words,
Park,
our eastern
pork,
speakers
what?
obviously have a
Park.
good deal of R,
Park.
practically no R.
Park,
Our
park.
New England and Brooklyn speaker, in contrast to our northern middle western speaker. Now, again, Miss Blair, will you give me these?
Father, park, park.
Again?
Park,
Father,
park.
park, park.
Father,
It's more
park,
British.
park.
Oh,
In other words, you've got
oh.
about a half retraction. In other words, your R is about half pronounced.
Father,
in contrast
father,
to Miss Buchanan and Mr.
park,
Kepke's,
park,
and certainly only
park,
half pronounced
park.
in contrast to Miss Windus, right?
That's right.
Okay. In
Oh.
other words, then, Miss Blair, again, seeing on our map, is in a transitional area. That is, she has many coastal southern similarities, pronunciations, but she also has several of the kinds of things, including this ash that we noticed was here in the southern part of the Middle West. Now, for just a moment, I'm going to run down my speech and see whether or not this patterning makes sense as far as I'm concerned. Marry, marry, marry.
Mary,
All
Mary,
three said
Mary.
differently, east of the mountains. It's greasy.
It's
South of
greasy.
California. Put it on.
Put it on.
Again, goes as a southern pronunciation with greasy. Off dog often, lot lod sorry. In other words, the
of,
same
dog,
kind of
often,
rounding and unrounding
lot,
that we
log,
noticed in Mr.
sorry.
Tuckey, the northern Central Atlantic Seaboard speaker. Wash water. I'm a water speaker, not a water speaker.
Wash,
Ash,
water.
ask.
Ash,
Same kind of distinction
ask.
in ash ask as I have down here in can and can. Exactly what
Yes,
we would
I
expect
can.
there.
I bought it
And
in a
these
can.
Being a Central Atlantic Seaboard
Can,
speaker, these would
can.
be in contrast. Father, part, not
Father,
very much
part, part.
Over here, about the house was my original
About the
pronunciation,
house.
and I'll say about the house, but I used to say
About the house.
And again,
First bird.
this one, any, many, penny, not
Color,
any, many, penny,
color.
because I'm close to
Any, many,
What we have
penny.
shown then,
Food.
and what these good people have been so kind as to help us demonstrate is this. Standard speakers of American English and standard speakers of English anywhere are going to have a different selection of the inventory, the possible
Standard
vowel
is just
sounds
one.
will appear in the same word. Again, the same word in quotation marks, words spelled the same way. Do not think because the spelling is different that the words must be pronounced differently. As we've seen, the spelling is the only thing that we have actually standardized. That's part of the written language. Now, this particular business, then, this whole matter of dialect difference, all standard speakers are right. What we're going to do next week
All
is to
standards.
actually study
We
patterning
need
of
one.
the patterning of the words.
My
and
brain
how
just
those words fit into grammar. Grammar next week.
was I right or not
The patterning
when I
of words.
thought that
Be
it's
with us
put it
then,
on
won't you?
of, dog, often, 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 often. Oh my gosh, it's really hard. Sorry, sorry, sorry. I always say sorry. So who knows? A lot of different dialects. So guys, I'm very interested in your opinion about this American dialects accents. Which one do you speak and what do you think? Maybe you can recommend another videos. How can I learn better general American accent? So thank you so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget about like, subscribe, and support me on Patreon. Here's the link for Amazon wishlist, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.